All right, everyone, welcome back here to part 3. So we're going to talk about strategies to support your best trading. We want to help bring out your best self. So the topics here for part 3, we're going to talk about mindfulness, which you've already heard us touch on several times, and even throughout the whole starter course, I have, I'm sure, in several different areas highlighted the importance of mindfulness. We'll talk about patterns and parts work, which is some really interesting stuff. And number 3, radical acceptance, which is radical because it's certainly hard to accept losing money trading, but it really is an important part of being able to progress towards being a long-term, proficient, profitable trader. All right, so I'll let you start here.
Sure. So just to give a definition, mindfulness is a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment, while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and physical sensations. That's really easily said, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all about allowing ourselves to become increasingly present with whatever is arising both within us and around us. That the more we're able to do that, the better chance we have of staying with ourselves and not losing ourselves to, the reactivity of the moment. So go ahead and...
So meditation practice isn't about trying to throw ourselves away and become something better. It is about befriending who we already are.
Right.
That was Pema Chodron. And that is the idea that we often, even in meditating, people often beat themselves up. I'm not doing it right.
Yeah.
Why am I having that thought?
Right.
And so it really is slowing down and acknowledging whatever is there.
Right. And within our practices, both as therapists and trader coaches, and our own mindfulness practice, that word befriending, about really being a friend to all that lives and arises within us. Mm-hmm. That's what a lot of these practices are about.
Yeah. I find, and we'll talk a little bit about meditation in a second, but when I meditate, I started kind of treating the thought almost as it's like a game. That for me makes it, rather than get frustrated, I kind of let it be fun, that I am focusing on the breath and then all of a sudden I'm thinking about having a sandwich. And I'm like, oh, that's fine, all right. Back to the breath. And then I'm thinking about, how I have to give June a bath later. And then I'm like, oh, that's fine too. All right, back to the breath. And every time I just kind of let it wander and then come back, it's like, for me, it's become sort of a fun game, which has made it a lot more enjoyable than when I was first meditating and I would get frustrated that my thought had left my breath, that I had gone off. Oh man, get back.
Right.
And having that more kind of playful experience with it has made it more fun and then easier to do on a daily basis, which then has helped my trading.
Right.
Yeah, the playful piece is really important. And Pema Chodron talks about calling yourself back gently the way you would call a dog.
Yeah.
You normally call a dog, right? Yeah. Calling yourself back gently. But I like the playful piece of it. And it made me think of, I think it was Eckhart Tolle had this idea of, try to watch the next arising thought. And that's what, when you were talking, it reminded me of that, like almost like make it a game. Like try to see if you can catch the next thought that comes by. And, he was talking about the experience of, sometimes then all the thoughts will just shrink away, when you're turning that spotlight on. But having that lightness about it is really a wonderful way of approaching mindfulness because it is friendly.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the thing that we often focus in our work with our clients, when facing any issue or problem that you're trying to address, there are 3 qualities that it's important to touch into. One being fierceness, being able to really look critically from a place of strength. The other one is the opposite, tenderness, to be able to look at it with loving compassion. And the third is actually playfulness. The sense of aliveness and fun. So as you're in this process of meeting the challenges of learning to trade, remembering where is fun in this? That it's not all seriousness. It's this is can be a fun endeavor.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a really good one. So these are some, how can mindfulness help you with trading? So consider these benefits. So one, it increases metacognitive awareness. It allows you to step back and more calmly and clearly evaluate our experiences and responses.
Mm-hmm.
So metacognitive awareness is that capacity to step back and actually take a look at all that's moving through your thoughts and emotions, and the beliefs that are driving it. Mindfulness practice is an incredible avenue towards stress reduction. It decreases physiological symptoms of mental tension resulting from adverse or demanding circumstances, because as we know, trading can definitely give you that. It boosts working memory. It strengthens and builds the cognitive system responsible for temporarily holding information available for processing.
And that's, even when they've done functional MRIs and they've seen like the frontal lobe expanding in the, in the brains of meditators,
Right.
that would be the brain change linked to that.
It also improves focus, increases our ability to focus and concentrate. So these are all really powerful benefits.
Absolutely.
From something as simple as just sitting with ourselves.
Yeah.
It lessens emotional reactivity. It reduces emotional hijack and acting out. It increases cognitive flexibility, which helps us, it develops self-observation skills. This disrupts automatic pathways built by prior learning, enabling integration of present moment input. CF, or cognitive flexibility, also allows faster return to baseline. And then finally, it reduces rumination. It decreases depression and self-judgment. So oftentimes when we've experienced a mistake or a setback, some loss, it triggers powerful rumination, which is just the perseverating, the spinning over and over again, the details of the mistake, and gets us further and further trapped in that emotional sink.
Yeah, just replaying the
Yeah.
event and just thinking about it again and again.
And from the parts perspective, that's a part of you that wants you to not make that mistake again, right?
Sure.
So it just
Right.
keeps pressing and
Sure.
pressing. But that mindfulness is something that actually helps with that, helps it calm down. And a really important aspect of that is the compassion, that we often, think of mindfulness as attention, but it really is, or awareness, but it is really important to bring in that befriending aspect of it.
Yeah.
Mindfulness is comprised of 3 key elements: awareness, attention, and intention.
Mm-hmm.
Awareness is the underlying ground of consciousness that encompasses all of our thoughts, emotional states, and sensory experience. Attention, the mental focus that discriminates, selects, and holds information in our awareness, what we choose to see as foreground and background. Intention, the guiding principles by which we aspire to move through the world, i.e. meeting ourselves and others with loving kindness, compassion, and acceptance.
And so as I look at these 3, awareness, and within the context of the practice of mindfulness, it's what are you willing to actually hold in your awareness? When you really begin to slow down and pay attention, because when we're not practicing these things and we get emotionally triggered, we get increasing tunnel vision, where all we can see is this thing that we're, so pressingly fixated on.
It's but what's also true
Right.
type of thing of, in a moment I feel like a terrible trader. I just had the biggest red day of my career. But what's also true is the bigger picture.
Right.
That I've learned a lot in the last X number of years, and that I actually sometimes have some really great green trades, and I feel like I am starting to learn this, and today is just a small setback.
And that is a very important part of the second one, attention.
Yeah.
What we choose to see as foreground and background.
Right.
So oftentimes when we arrive at, just like you were talking about, a difficult trade, a difficult situation, okay, so that's sitting in the foreground of our awareness.
Right.
But that question you asked, okay, what else is true?
Yeah.
What else is here, and can I begin to create that sense of a large enough container to hold both of them?
Right, so that is, the thing that you do there, Ross, that is intentionality. Like you have an intention to expand your awareness, and when you expand it, you're actually able to allow these things to come more into balance. shifting from just there being this thing that's in the foreground taking up all the space to having more balance between the two. And that is the three really at work. There's a like a meditation or quote or idea that we use sometimes of kind of children saying, remember, we are the sky, everything else is just the weather, right? And when you have that intention to kind of step back and allow yourself to see everything,
Right.
or really invite yourself to even look at what is also true.
Yeah.
That you're getting into that really vast space where you're able to, there is more containment around all of it and more appreciation for it.
When you think about, as a student, when you're thinking about a successful trader, it's easy to think about where do they buy and where do they sell.
Mm-hmm.
But an equally big part is the mindset. Because being a successful trader is not just following a recipe. It's the mindset every single day that I come in, or that anyone else that's profitable comes in and is able to, as much as possible, more on some days, less on other days, but have mindfulness, have a sense of awareness, and be able to try to bring our best self to the table. So it's kind of one of those things that if you see people out there who are doing this and they're profitable, then it might be a good idea for you to really seriously check it out as well.
Right.
Because it works.
Right. And especially that last one with intention, the intentions that Diane and I probably teach the most are all around meeting ourselves with loving kindness, compassion, and acceptance. When you really begin to practice those things, it makes it so much easier to navigate the highs and lows, the disappointments, all of it.
Yeah.
This returning to, always coming back to this place of how good of a friend am I being to myself. And that's not always about just, softness and butterflies. It's sometimes, being willing to challenge ourselves, but to do so from a very kind and loving place. So, you want to do this one?
Sure.
Okay.
7 attitudinal foundations of mindfulness practice. Non-judgment is to be impartial, to notice the inclination to judge, but noticing it with kindness. Patience, letting things unfold in their own time. And I think a lot about what you just described about how you come into trading, how, the mindset that you're in.
The non-judging part, the being impartial and noticing the inclination to judge with kindness. So even as you notice the thoughts, the judgmental thoughts arising, it's not about silencing those completely. It's about noticing those as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So befriending all that arises within us includes the harsh critics, the judge, having curiosity. What is that about?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go. Number 3.
Beginner's mind, release expectations based on rigidly held beliefs. And that can be really hard, the more, as you move up that competency spectrum that we talked about in the second section of this chapter. You have experiences, you have expectations that are based on what's happened before, what you feel like and it's hard sometimes to let go of your expectations, but there can be value in practicing this.
Well, and that's also true. So, the market doesn't ever stay the same. Once you learn a particular strategy, once you have a certain approach, the market doesn't conveniently just stay in accordance with it.
Absolutely.
So,
Right, like that story that you told in, I think it was section 1 with the trader who made all of his money in the 90s and then held on to that same thing through all this time period.
Right.
That's, when you think of rigidly held beliefs.
So beginner's mind is all about our capacity to let go of what we think we know and move into that place of open curiosity that we most associate with somebody that's just beginning. What's here that I don't necessarily know already.
Right.
So there's a saying that in the beginner's mind there are infinite possibilities, in the expert's mind there are only few. So.
That saying as it applies to trading, because I've met beginner traders and certainly traders in the simulator who will trade from 9:30 until 4 p.m. Then they're ready to do some after-hours trades. They might even do pre-market trades the next morning. They'll trade all day long, endless opportunities.
Right.
This. And usually the higher you move on the proficiency spectrum, generally the less you trade because your quality filter standard is going higher. Certainly there are some very successful traders who can trade for 6 hours, 7 hours, and good for them. But most really do bring it down.
Right. But sometimes it, based on circumstances, when things change and the things that we held as true no longer apply,
right.
Then we have to return to that place of,
right.
Okay, what else is true?
Right.
Coming back to the place of beginning.
Yeah.
So trust, believe in yourself, be your own intuitive guide and authority.
Right. And so, as through all of this, and there were some things that you were saying earlier in one of the previous segments, learning to trust yourself. Learning, that you are exactly where you need to be in this process. And that you're developing a sense of knowing what you're doing. That at the end of the day, the person that you're going to be responsible to is yourself.
Yeah.
It's not going to be one of the teachers. It's not going to be any of us. It's just you. So learning to develop a trusting relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
Based on, the things you're learning, the reality of situations. We can't emphasize that enough, that ultimately you need to be your own guide.
Yeah. I think on that note, I sometimes, I know that I try not to compare myself to other people too much, but sometimes people will, throw me a comment like, hey Ross, you made 3,000 on this stock. This person over here made 30,000, you're a real, crappy trader.
Right.
Why, just they'll throw a comment out. And that's usually where a comparison comes when someone introduces it to me because I don't seek it.
Right.
But then all of a sudden, it's very easy for me to feel bad about myself because I'm like, man, what is wrong with me? I could have made if I had a little more confidence, or if this, if that, I could have, should have, would have. And then I try to bring it back to why did I start doing this?
Right.
What am I here for?
Right.
I'm here because I want financial independence. I don't want to ever have a 9-to-5 job again. I want to be my own boss. What do I need to be my own boss? 200 a day, 400 a day.
Right.
Am I doing it? Yes. Do I
Right.
need to be making 40,000 a day? No. Is that my goal? Is it my intention to try to show people? I mean, it's just not there.
Right.
So, I think sometimes when it comes to comparing yourself with others, coming back to trusting yourself and what you're really here for is an important one to stay grounded.
Right.
Non-striving, be in the unfolding moment instead of chasing after imagined perfection. Focus on being rather than doing. And so a lot of what you just talked about is that non-striving. It's allowing yourself to just do you, right?
Right.
To do what you set out to do, and also to meet the moment with a little bit of beginner's mind, in the way of allowing it to unfold, allowing yourself to be, amazed or curious, or that even kind of neutrality of I'm not pushing, I'm not pulling, I'm allowing myself to be right where I am, and I'm allowing myself to kind of meet the current of this.
This reminds me of that years ago in a yoga class, we had this teacher in Kundalini yoga. You hold these postures or these movements and you repeat them over and over, like for a really long time. And I would catch myself getting really upset with the teacher, thinking like, did she forget her watch? Is she thinking about something else? Is she just being cruel? What is going on here? And then she would ask this question: how easy can you let this be? And that question just hit me like a sledgehammer, because it automatically made me think about how much effort was going on inside of me, all of this turmoil that I was completely creating myself.
That's really odd.
That had nothing to do with what I was actually doing. All of this tension that was just me, striving so hard.
And it's a good reminder, not just when we're like it's a good reminder when we are really efforting and really
Right.
frustrated and all of that, but it's even a good reminder in times when we're not at that extreme. And I think about that spectrum, right, of emotional trading that we talked about in part one. And, even before you're, tipping into a lot of distress, catching yourself when it's
Right.
starting to shift. How easy can I let this be?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So acceptance, allowing things to be as they actually are rather than how we want them to be or believe they should be. We see that word "should" a lot with
Right.
with
Mhm.
judgment, with expectations. So coming back and allowing instead, and
then this is the place, that phrase that we've shared of, trade the market you're in, not the market you wish you were in.
Yeah.
This is a really good example of what we're talking about when we use the word acceptance. What is reality as it is, rather than the reality that we wish was here, or if our emotions are beginning to get really triggered, the reality that we're seeing through a particular lens
Right.
that may not be fully true.
Right.
So, yes, acceptance is
yeah,
a really important one.
So I recently had the longest consecutive red streak that I've ever had as a
Right.
trader, and I was sort of struggling with, after like day 2, coming in on what ended up being the 3rd red day, being like, okay, so I've had 2 red days. I'm gonna just accept that, let it be what it is, and not make that my focus of trading today.
Right.
And yet at the same time, I was sort of holding on to, this can't be a 3rd consecutive red day.
Right.
And then when I started to go red, I started to get desperate to find anything that would get me back to green.
Right.
And I ended up closing the day red. And then I came in on day 4 and I was like, okay, seriously. On the one hand, I was like, should I trade differently because I just had 3 red days? Should I? Because that's not really accepting it. If I'm now trading the market much more conservatively when there may well be lots of opportunities. We've been in lots of volatility. And, I sort of struggled with that. On the one hand, being able to accept and free myself from the implications of a consecutive green or red day streak. Because I've had them both ways. On the green side, so fixated that I have to maintain this
Right,
streak,
right.
when it's not really that important.
Right.
But at the same time, having the presence of mind, and I think that comes from the mindfulness, to be able to say, I'm on a green streak right now, the market is really hot, this is the time to be more aggressive. Being more aggressive could result in a bigger loss. Can I handle that?
Yeah.
Or the market right now, I'm red, the market is a little bit more difficult for me. I don't need to hold on to how many consecutive red days I've had, but just accept that currently I'm in a more difficult market.
Yeah.
And I should be a little more cautious. And that, that's like right walking on the line between holding on and clinging and accepting and non-striving. Like it's sort of all of that in those moments of,
Right.
today I'm going to just try to trade the best I can. Given the fact that I've had 4 red days, the market's really weak, I'd like to be green and not have a 5th red day.
right.
But
That's
stay
acknowledging
focused.
everything.
Right.
What
That's
you
the
just
goal.
described,
Yeah.
acknowledging everything, and
Right.
that is the goal.
Yeah.
Even the feeling of the part of you, which we'll talk a little bit about later, that desperately does not want another red day.
Right.
Accepting that as well.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that.
So last one, you touched on it, letting go, not clinging, accepting that the present moment is always changing, and staying willing to change with it.
Yep.
And that's that image that Pema Trojan shares of, like our mind, our awareness being the vast, clear blue sky. And all of these emotional upheavals are like the weather.
Mm-hmm.
They come and they go, but none of them are permanent.
Correct.
And so if we can treat it that way, then it becomes a lot easier to meet that with loving kindness, compassion, and acceptance.
Yeah.
So there's a meditation called Tonglen. This comes from Tibetan Buddhism. And Tonglen is the Tonglen practice, also known as taking and sending, reverses our usual logic of avoiding suffering and seeking pleasure. In Tonglen practice, we visualize taking in the pain of others with every in-breath and sending out whatever might benefit them on the out-breath. In this process, we begin to feel love for both ourselves and others. We begin to take care of ourselves and others. Tonglen awakens our compassion, and introduces us to a far bigger view of reality. It introduces us to the unlimited spaciousness of, I always mess up this word, shunyata, emptiness. By doing the practice, we begin to connect with the more open dimensions of our being. And this really taps into what we were talking about earlier with emotional intelligence, of really beginning to increase our capacity for empathy and connection with others. That as we begin to practice these things, our compassion for ourselves really begins to grow as we have compassion for others as well. And Tonglen is just a really nice meditation practice. Usually when we do this, we start simply with ourselves, of inviting ourselves into this space in which to be held in a kinder, more loving way. And so we'll often talk about, as you do that, can you begin to notice what it's like to both offer that to yourself and to receive it? And in that practice, and all the stuff that arises when we do that, you'd be surprised how hard that can be for some people. And then expanding that circle. Can you, offer empathy and compassion to all the other traders, all the other students that are working on this process and having struggles in the chat room, all that stuff. And then expanding that out to the world at large.
And the idea of it is so, with all of this stuff, all of this stuff in this, support chapter here that we're in, there is such an incredible difference between talking about it and doing it.
Right.
So we can talk about these ideas, but it does not really have an impact. The knowledge really is the experience. When we actually sit and do what Ted is suggesting, like have that relationship with ourselves, or breathe in the pain of the other traders that all had a loss today. Wow, what a shift that would create, right?
Sure.
Within yourself, but also that it reverberates, that there really is a powerful way of upholding each other through this.
And we've talked about this quite a bit, but one of the things that has been really important to me in the community of day trading is that at Warrior Trading, we sort of change the day trading culture that a lot of people know of from the 1990s, the profanity-laced, bro talk, boiler room type of culture. That we're, for the most part, average folks coming together to try to find a way to carve a little bit of profit out of the market.
Right.
And that we're a team, we trade with confidence when we're as a community, and that we really are trying to be supportive of each other. And these are the types of things that have helped me on my path to getting to where I am. And I hope that a lot of you guys really soak in a lot of this and give it a shot, put it into practice for a period of time, and say it's what you're going to do for the month of whatever, or for the next week, and see if it makes a difference for you.
And in our the pro level mentor sessions that Diane and I do, we guide people through actively practicing these things in the Mindful Monday class.
Right. So you can actually just tune in, and you can that you can be in it. It's a powerful thing. We're going to be getting into parts next, and when I think about Tonglen, one of the things that I think about is this way of really affecting some of these parts in us. And I have a background in Kundalini Yoga. There's the idea of the three minds. The negative mind sees all the dangers. The positive mind sees all the opportunities, right? And so in trading, you can feel the push and pull of those two things quite a bit. And the idea is to come into the space of the neutral mind. And the space of the neutral mind is a place where things are a win-win. You're taking that competition out of the, it's not like I'm gonna try to get one over on this person, or I'm afraid they're getting one over on me. It's that place of neutrality. And within yourself, the place of neutrality is that you feel those parts of you that are terrified and just want to run away and not trade anymore. Yeah. And then the parts
that are really
that are
optimistic and aggressive.
And that you welcome them both in through that neutral mind. So I think Tonglen is a way of accessing that.
Right. So in talking about parts work, and this comes from the work of Richard Schwartz that we mentioned in the first segment, and his work is called Internal Family Systems, and it's the idea that the self is not just a single unified entity, but made up of a lot of parts. So I guess I'll read this one. A part is not just a temporary emotional state or habitual thought pattern. Instead, it is a discrete and autonomous mental system that has an idiosyncratic range of emotion, style of expression, set of abilities, desires, and view of the world. In other words, it is as if we each contained a society of people, each of whom is at a different age and has different interests, talents, and temperaments. So this is a pretty radical idea, but when we think about what Diane was talking about with the negative mind and the positive mind, and with the neutral mind being able to create a large enough container to encompass both ends of that spectrum.
Yeah.
So different parts of us that might carry very different points of reference and agendas, as if they were actually a society of people, like he says, living within us.
Right, and so Richard Schwartz calls that part that would relate to the neutral mind, he calls it self-energy, self-leadership.
Right.
We can go to next.
Yeah.
Understanding self in parts. Each of us has multiple dimensions or parts of us that have distinct roles, motivations, beliefs, and behaviors. We can become aware of our parts and the patterns they promote utilizing mindfulness. We can come to have an easier and more collaborative relationship even with our most troublesome parts. That is where we begin to experience more freedom and success. By stepping back and observing our thoughts and behaviors, we allow ourselves to access the true self or self-leadership. Beneath the layers of parts, there is a core self more closely related to our basic awareness. It is the center of who we are, capable of stepping back, turning toward, witnessing, and ultimately holding the various parts of who we are. When self is differentiated, it is capable of becoming an active, compassionate leader for our other parts. Self-energy and self-leadership are marked by calmness, curiosity, clarity, compassion, confidence, creativity, courage, and connectedness.
Right, and so through the practice of mindfulness, we are able to slow down, take that step back, and engage in one or more of these 8 C's. So when I turn towards myself, with a little bit of calmness, and especially I love curiosity. It's like, what is this? What's happening here? Compassion, doing all of those things allows us to see a little more clearly. And sometimes, the courage to really look, and especially for parts of us that we may have a hard time experiencing, whether through the simple fact that we don't like that part of us or that its energy is really intense. And then cultivating a sense of connectedness with it.
Yeah.
This is the internal relationship that Diane and I spend a lot of our work with people helping to cultivate.
Earlier you talked about fierceness, tenderness, and playfulness, which are not from Dick Schwartz, but from Stephen Gilligan. And the ideas of curiosity and creativity are similar to playfulness. The ideas of compassion, similar to tenderness. The idea of courage, similar to fierceness. But the key thing is pulling forward these different aspects of ourselves, kind of these ways that we can kind of take a step in. The word differentiated up there, when self is differentiated, what do we mean by that? It means that we have enough self-energy to be more in that neutral mind. So we would call it a critical mass of self-energy, to be in that neutral mind. It's only in that place that you can see that you are not one of those parts, when you have a critical mass of self. If you are blended together with a part, you see things as they see it.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, so you and I have been having conversations around this stuff for a long time.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would like to share of parts that you've identified, especially polarized parts that you've...
Right, so, that's kind of the funny thing. I have aspects or parts of myself that are really critical. A part of myself that's, for instance, really critical of my trading, is always saying that I'm not doing good enough, and it's the part of me that's just kind of a little bit of a bully.
Right.
His name's Richard, but he goes by Dick. And then there's, the part of me that kind of goes rogue and is super aggressive, is impulsive, and has no restraint and will swing for home runs. That's Rambo. And then there's the part of me that's really fearful, that's afraid of loss.
Right.
And as soon as I have a tiny profit, that part of me will sell. That just wants to get out, afraid of letting it ride. And it's very interesting how my fear of loss has turned me into a day trader,
Right.
because day trading is incredibly high risk, and most people lose money day trading. And yet for me, it's always felt less scary than putting that same amount of money into the market. I suppose the market, even though historically, has gone up for 100 plus years,
Right.
it's this kind of unknown of not knowing when maybe I'll need that money for something. And if you happen to need it today and the market is down a lot, well, it's not a good time to take it out. Whereas with the day trading, the money's always at the end of the day available. If I need it, I can take it.
Right.
And so that's a good sense of confidence. It's like money in a savings account, essentially. And then intraday, if I can trade it and make some money, then it grows. But yeah, I definitely have these conflicting sort of polarizing aspects. The one that's very fearful, is afraid of risk. As soon as it has a little bit of profit, wants to sell.
Right.
And then the other part that does sometimes want to swing for home runs and get some really big wins. It feels good to have a big winner. It's it's a kind of achievement type of thing. It's a that aspect of myself is also very competitive and more aggressive.
Right.
It's, and then of course the critical side, that's not happy with either aspect, is always, you're too conservative, you're too aggressive. So, those are sort of three small aspects of myself. And the reason I kind of look at them as different aspects, of course, this is all just part of me as one person. Yet, on certain days, I will feel much more strongly towards one part of myself than another, which is interesting. On some days, I'll be very critical of myself. On other days, I'll be very conservative. I'll be much more nervous. On other days, I'll be much more confident, much more aggressive. And so I kind of see these different, aspects of my personality ultimately.
Right. There are people and situations that can bring out parts in us, right?
Sure.
Just like parts in other people will bring out parts in us, that know each other.
Yeah.
We also have that same kind of thing with our environment. Certain environments will bring different parts forward. I'm wondering, in trading, are there certain changes in the market that bring forward different parts in you? What brings forward Rambo? What brings?
Yeah. So I would say when we're seeing stocks that are moving really quickly, when we're seeing some incredible action, that's when I start to step up to the plate and try to go for some home runs.
Right.
And even though I statistically know from my data that my top 25 biggest winners and my top 25 biggest losers cancel each other out. So the majority of my profit comes from trades that are more base hit or smaller wins. I still occasionally try to go for that big win, whether it's because the market's hot, I think other people are making money maybe, or I just feel like it would be silly not to hold this a little longer. And then the part of me that gets conservative and a little nervous, that part of me that's sort of when I get into a trade. The moment I'm in a trade, I'm like, now it's real.
Yeah.
Now there's risk.
Right.
And the second it starts to feel like it might not be working, that part starts to get nervous and is like, uh-oh.
Right.
And today, for instance, I had a trade that I took. I did a bottom bounce, bought a stock that was a little weak, a little risky strategy, but sometimes is one that I like. And the first time I did it, I almost immediately lost like $1,000. And then I got back into on a different stock for that same setup and immediately was up 300 and was like, I better take it off the table. I took it off the table. And if I had left it on a little longer, I would have probably made like 2,500 because the stock just bounced off the bottom. And I was like, man, why did you sell so soon? You had such a great entry. And it was like, well, last time I did the same thing and it was immediate loss.
Right.
And I'm not in a place on the day where I feel like I'm in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
I'm kind of trying to play catch up.
Uh-huh.
Right.
So when I'm playing catch up, on the one hand, I'm aggressive because I'll jump at things quickly. But on the other hand, I feel like I need to cut things really fast if they don't instantly work,
Right.
because I can't afford risk, which is sort of a funny thing to take lots of risk when you can't afford risk. But it's sort of that kind of dual thing of trying to play catch up while at the same time not losing any more.
Yeah.
So it can make you a little, or make me at least
Right.
a little jumpy from one thing to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that you just described, moment to moment.
Yeah.
We have this capacity. What happens to us is we become very blended
Yeah.
with each one of these parts.
Yeah.
So in every moment that you describe, the deeper you go into that blending, it's as if nothing else exists.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So when you're in that state of the heightened aggression,
Yeah.
that guy can't see any need for caution.
No.
Nothing. There is no caution.
Yeah.
And then when he disappears,
Yeah.
and this other part of you shows up,
Right.
and you get blended with,
Yeah.
oh my God, what's
I know.
happening?
And what's funny is that sometimes the aggressive side will dig a hole that now the conservative side has to work his way out of.
Right.
Right.
Because the aggressive side will jump me in that position impulsively
Mhm.
sometimes.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I'm in this position with 5,000 shares. It's a
Right.
$40 stock. That's
Mhm.
$200,000 plus on the line. What am I doing? I got to start getting out.
Right.
And so it's very funny how I can shift. And that happens more when I'm sort of at the edge of the spectrum in terms of my discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I'm pushing the envelope in
Right.
terms of I'm red and trying to dig myself out of the hole, or I'm trying to swing for a home run, or something is sort of at the extremes.
Yeah.
When
So-
I'm more confined to small share size and I'm within normal range of my daily P&L, I feel much less of that.
And that's what you would expect with parts, right? Parts tend to lead more when we are
Yeah.
further along that emotional spectrum.
Right. The more triggered we are, the more they show up and
Yeah.
take over. So I'm really curious, because you've, done a lot of work getting to know these parts of you. I'm really curious what it's been like to have this point of reference, to have this relationship
Mm-hmm.
with these, and being able to identify and turn towards these parts of you. What has that been like?
I think the presence of mind to be able to say, sometimes when I'm in the moment starting to feel flustered, that this is an aspect of yourself right now that is not okay with losing, and being able to kind of identify it
Mm-hmm.
helps me, I suppose, kind of cut it off at the past from continuing.
Right.
And really, in the last year, it's only happened once that I went totally out of control, and that's really once in the last maybe 8 years or so, which is, all things considered, I think pretty darn good.
Right.
But yeah, generally, I think that presence of mind, the work that we've done has given me presence of mind to be able to identify when certain aspects of myself are kind of dominating my behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I will choose to let them continue to sit in that driver's seat, and I'll be aggressive because I think, well, if I can get myself back to green and I don't have to do a 5th red day recap, it's worth it.
So that is a collaborative relationship with parts. So that is, like you said, sometimes I'll choose to let them take the lead.
Mhm.
And so that really is having a critical mass of self to
Mhm.
allow
Right.
those decisions.
Mhm.
And that's a thing that we talk about in this kind of work is that inherently there are no bad parts.
Right,
So
Yeah.
each one of them has a positive intention.
absolutely.
They're trying to help us in some way.
Yeah.
And just as with people,
Mhm.
when we can focus on the quality of the relationship we're having with them
Mhm.
and the communication that begins to emerge and exist,
Mhm.
that's where true collaboration and progress can be made.
Yeah.
So it's not about trying to get rid of anything that exists within us. It's about changing the relationship we have with them.
And I think that would be an extension of one of the benefits is it has made me more forgiving of myself, because I can sort of, and I don't always know to what extent it's good or bad, but I can sort of say, well, this is the aspect of myself that drove that behavior. It's this really aggressive side of me. That aspect of myself has served me generally really well.
Right.
In this moment, it didn't work out super well, but it's okay. So I try to kind of see even if one aspect of myself, maybe the conservative side said, no, don't take that trade, and then ended up ripping. I'm like, well, you know what? That conservative aspect of yourself has really saved you a lot over the years.
Right.
So I'm just going to say that for whatever reason, I was a little more conservative on that, but it's okay. So I think that that's kind of helped me have a better relationship with some of the behaviors and try to be more forgiving. Although I do get quite upset with myself still when I'm starting to go into a red streak and I don't ease off the throttle soon enough.
Right.
Sometimes I'll let Rambo, kind of take the lead a little too long because I guess I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe I'll bounce myself right out of the red, have a $25,000 winner, and I'm back at all-time highs just like that.
Right.
And of course, a few times he's been right.
Right.
But if he's wrong, then I'm digging the hole a lot deeper.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, he's going to have to take the back seat, and I'm going to have to do the heavy lifting of digging myself out one shovelful at a time.
Right.
And that's not the fun. That's not the fun trading.
While that critic
Right.
stands over you yelling at you the whole time.
Yeah. Why did you not take
Right.
control sooner? Why did you let yourself do this?
Right, that's not the fun, but there's something when you're talking about Rambo and swinging for the fences that is the fun.
Right.
And so that's the trade-off.
Well, and a thing that we've found, and when we begin to really work with these parts of us, when we start a dialogue with them, when they begin to feel like we're taking them seriously,
Yeah.
they tend to start a process of emerging towards their best selves. So this
Rather
idea
than
that,
suppressing
Right.
and bubbling up and pressurizing.
right, exactly. So as we do that, then they begin to work better with each other.
Right. Because I can't suppress the sometimes instinct to try to hit a home run
Right.
or to try to be really aggressive. If I just try to suppress
Right.
that feeling, that urge, and just
Eventually that's
ignore
going to
it.
blow up in your face.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. It's better to have a mindset of like, what's working in this whole machine and this whole system.
Right.
Like this whole machine's actually working pretty well.
Yeah.
Imperfectly, but well.
Right.
Yeah.
So parts are like, and we probably covered a lot of this in the conversation we just had. So parts are like subpersonalities. Parts interact inside of us similarly to how people interact in our outside world. Some know and like each other, while some don't. All act in ways they consider good for us, unless they are exiled or in distress. Parts are experienced as thoughts, feelings, sensations, images, physical symptoms. All want something positive for you and will use different strategies to get your attention. For example, showing up as either depression, anxiety, sometimes addiction, going blank, criticism. They are organized to protect you and may take on extreme roles by either dominating or hiding. Some, like what we call exiled parts, hold the burdens of pain and vulnerability. Others, which are considered protective parts, are referred to as either proactive managers, trying to stop a vulnerable part from being activated, or reactive firefighters, trying to distract from a vulnerable part that's been triggered. Exiled parts are often young parts holding extreme feelings and or beliefs that become isolated from the rest of the system, such as the idea of like I'm worthless. So when you think about these parts that you've described, a lot of them I would consider manager parts because they have very distinct, persistent roles that regularly show up.
Right. Rambo, if unchecked, could
Become a
escalate
fighter.
from a manager to a firefighter.
Firefighter part, yeah. When Rambo starts really swinging.
Yeah.
And
Things get
maybe
crazy.
you experience that at some point, and maybe Rambo's more of a manager now.
Yeah, well, when I was first trading, that was the aspect of myself that would just go totally rogue, would just be super, super aggressive, and I've
Right.
brought that back in.
Yeah.
Right.
I've had to restrain a little bit by learning that I can be far too aggressive for my own good if I am unchecked completely.
And so this idea that all of that activity is trying to keep us from these more vulnerable emotional places. So when you think about
Right.
Rambo, think about think
Yeah,
about that.
he's trying to protect old nervous Randy, who's afraid of having a red day, and the last thing he wants to do is have to
Right.
explain to himself or others that he just lost money trading.
Right.
Very nervous. Yeah, I mean, because that's the whole thing of doing anything to avoid a red day.
Right.
That's when that aspect
Right.
would come out. When I was red, and I was like, no, I'm down 2,000. All right, I'll buy 10,000 shares. All I need to make is 20 cents. I'll be back to break even. Then I'm down $4,000.
Right.
All I need to do is buy 20,000 shares and make 20 cents. I'll be back to break even.
Right.
Then I'm down $8,000. All I need to do is buy 40. I only have the buying power for 30,000 shares. So now I'm going to buy this 30,000 shares, and when I'm up 20 cents on it, I'm not going to sell
Right.
because I'm not break even yet.
Mhm.
And then it comes back to break even, goes to a loss, and now I'm down 12 grand on the day.
Right.
Right.
And I mean, it's a spiral, a snowball, and
And all of that is trying to protect you from that place.
that emotion.
That
Yeah.
when you are in the middle of a loss,
Yeah,
there is this incredibly vulnerable emotion
yeah,
that feels terrible.
it does.
And your whole system is trying to operate to keep you from ever having to feel that feeling.
Yeah,
So even as we befriend all of these different, proactive protector parts, also beginning to befriend our much more vulnerable, sometimes elusive exile parts.
Exiles, yeah.
mm.
So this idea of going back, this theme that we've been talking about through all of these segments, befriending ourselves. The degree to which trading really requires you to have a much kinder, more loving relationship with all of this that exists within you.
Yeah,
The other parts in the system don't think that you can handle meeting up with your exiles.
Right.
And so
Hmm.
it's really the work of not just working with the protectors, but also, demonstrating that you can meet that that wounded part of yourself without being overwhelmed.
Right.
Sometimes even asking the exile parts to agree not to overwhelm you.
Mm-hmm.
mm.
I want to see you, I want to be with you, but I don't want you to overwhelm me.
And so when we begin to really work with ourselves and these especially more vulnerable parts of us, and the rest of our system begins to see, wow, that's actually okay.
Mhm.
We can survive this contact.
Yeah,
Then that really frees them again to become kind of their best selves, because they're no longer desperately trying to do this job
right.
of protecting you from a bad feeling.
Yeah,
Right,
Or they consider it.
everything isn't at all costs anymore.
Right.
right.
They can be more
Yeah.
reasonable.
Yeah,
Then they can be more collaborative and have a lot more fun.
Yeah.
So-
yeah.
Okay.
All right. So steps for befriending parts, and I think we've touched on a lot of this. So I'll just go through it real quick. Or do you want to? Or
Sure.
Go ahead.
Unblending from parts and accessing self by connecting with any of the 8 C's. We talked about that. So you can shift toward curiosity is like one of my favorites. You
Compassion.
can, come into a place of compassion. You can meet up with courage. Turning attention toward the part that needs assistance and beginning to identify its nature. So this is really getting to know. We call this focusing on a part, getting to know the part, noticing when the part activates. You
How
gave
does
us
it name
names.
itself? Those are
right?
wonderful
Yeah.
examples.
Yeah. What does a part feel emotionally? What does a part feel like in your body? So some parts show up in a certain part of our body, like in our stomach or our head. What is the part saying? So that's that talk, right? It might
Yeah.
have the same message. How does it make you behave? And that's the action that you carry out when this part is leading you or when it's directing you even. And what does it want?
Mhm.
So that's all from focusing on the part and allowing yourself to get to know it. Sometimes it can even be helpful to focus in a way where you try to visualize the part. You might actually be able to see it. And noticing things like, does it turn away from you?
Right.
Does it hide from you? So inviting the part to a place where it can be met with loving kindness, compassion, and acceptance. When I say inviting it to a place where it can be met with that, some of the exile parts might, in the place where they are currently, might not be able to be. So sometimes it is actually inviting them forward, inviting them into a different place, or where would you like to be?
Right.
Would you like to be here with me? Engaging with the part through holding, internal listening, and direct communication. Holding is, it's like, these are parts, right? You could actually be like physically holding, like holding a pillow or something, but the idea of holding is what we're really talking about, like holding with your heart. Notice what it's like for the part to be met in this way. Explore with the part what might help it to release its burdens or change its agendas. And that's kind of like asking questions of the part, like, what would you like to be doing if you weren't doing this? What would you do if you had the day off?
Right.
A lot of these parts are really young, and you'd be surprised at the things that they would like to do.
Right.
They might just want to skip stones on a lake or something. What do you want to move towards together? And that's important for you to kind of figure out for yourself. Invite the part to reintegrate with this system.
And that idea is, the idea of this being a system. So it's not that we work with these parts and then they just disappear into us.
Sure.
It is the idea of this is an internal system.
Yeah.
And it's more, how can these parts of us begin to work in harmony to become basically a happier family?
Right.
And it is, we've been doing this kind of work as therapists for a really long time. And it is infinitely fascinating to hear these internal conversations unfold.
Mm.
And especially like what Diane was talking about, some of these parts are really young versions of us. And so when we begin to connect and ask questions like what would they rather be doing,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's really surprising and often entertaining. So, yeah. So I remember the 3 tricks of returning to self-leadership. And this is especially when we know that we've been triggered.
Yeah.
So number 1, slow down your breathing.
Yeah.
Deep breathing will begin to regulate the nervous system, as we talked about in that first section. Slow down your thinking. When those emotions are triggered, when these parts are triggered, they tend to have pretty fast-moving thought patterns.
Yeah.
And all of these, the flood of thoughts that come through us, whether that's the perseveration, the rumination, there's the spinning over and over again, the same thoughts. Slowing all of that down. Really directing your mind to utilizing intention and attention.
Yeah.
And expanding your awareness. Oh, it's this guy thing here. Notice parts that arise and consider the wisdom and limits of each. Touch into the expansiveness. Be the sky. Remembering everything else is just the weather. Allow yourself to notice and hear from the parts that have shown up. Each has their own wisdom to impart, however, each is limited as well. While they hold the emotions connected to previous experiences, each part is limited by not having cognitive access to the complete current situation. Oftentimes, these parts of us are, to some degree, are stuck in aspects of the past. So, parts can only see what they see. In the seat of self, you see the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of picture that as Randy, for instance, on the dip of my piano going down, he can only see straight down.
Right.
He's looking straight down, he's scared. He can't see back to how far he's come.
Right.
He can't see ahead, and no one knows ahead. But that part of me is so fearful so when I'm having like my equity curve and I have one day that's down or 2 days that are down, that's so zoned in on that little window.
Right.
Whereas when I blow it back out, it's like, well, this was $500, this was 1.2 million.
Right.
And right now, even if you're down 50 grand, even 50 grand,
Right.
this is where you've come from. But that part of myself is so fixated on very
Mhm.
short-term horizons that that emotion just can come right up very quickly. And guys and gals watching this really is the foundation of getting to a place where you're thinking like a profitable trader and you're adopting the mindset of a profitable trader, and you're right away starting to work through some of the aspects that cause whatever it is, 9 out of 10 traders to drop out.
Right.
It's not enough to just have the skill of knowing how to press the buy button and the sell button and to understand the basics of a strategy or to understand technical analysis. You also need to have the mindset and the thinking of a profitable trader to know when to be aggressive, when to be conservative, when to restrain yourself, when to let yourself put the pedal to the metal.
Right.
And nobody is going to be perfect 100% of the time. That's not a realistic expectation. But if you can be, of course, profitable at least 50, 60, 70% of the time, you're going to do well. And if you can really, I think when you're at the extremes of some of the best days and some of the worst days, be able to maintain presence of mind, you'll be able to see through some of those
Right.
really challenging situations where other traders might crack, and those days could end up just totally falling apart. And yeah.
Right. So
Yeah,
we have-
one of the things that comes up sometimes when we're working with traders is the negative mind that wants you to walk away. That point of like, how do I deal with this fear that I have? And it's like coming to that acceptance of the safest thing to do is going to be not trade at all.
Yeah.
So recognize that. And when you're talking about Randy, the thing that kind of came to me a lot was, that this is a part that needs updating a lot. That
Right.
this is Randy, this is how far we've gone, because
Yeah.
Randy's looking down here and, and needs that, it's a reassurance, but it's a reminder, it's an updating.
Mhm.
And oftentimes, over time, Randy will
Learn to trust you.
learn to trust more and more,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
So we have one more segment on, or one more piece of this on radical acceptance. So this is the work of Tara Brach, who is one of our favorite writers, authors. Radical acceptance, basically the willingness to compassionately acknowledge, tolerate, and completely accept reality just as it is, rather than insisting it be something it isn't. So in the context of trading, as we've shared, trade the market you're in, not the one you wish you were in.
Yeah.
Radical acceptance is the cornerstone for being able to do that. And in the context of these various parts that we've been talking about, it's also accepting the existence of these parts, that they have their tendencies. We can begin to shift the relationship we have with them, and in that process they begin to, like we had said earlier, begin to inhabit their best selves based on the relationship we're having, but accepting that they exist.
Yeah.
So accepting all that exists within us and what is unfolding in the reality around us.
Radical acceptance is acceptance of things as they are, understanding what we can and cannot control in life, being non-judgmental, looking at just the facts of the situation, acknowledging our situation, letting go and not fighting against reality.
Right. It all comes back to accepting reality as it is.
Yeah.
And it's when we take that step, when we've hit a place where we're up against a wall, and what is required is developing some new approach, some new, maybe even a whole new strategy. We can only do that if we first accept what's actually happening right here in front of us.
Right. And that's incredibly hard for a lot of beginner traders who have already spent weeks or months, and some of you guys may be in the sort of very beginning of competency. You're past novice, you're past advanced beginner, but you're not profitable, and so it might feel so frustrating to just feel like, I have to just accept that all of this to this date has not generated a significant return, and that I have to make a big shift, or I have to start this new thing. And yet, if you don't do that and you keep going into a headwind and keep pushing, you're not going to find that breakthrough.
Right.
And so to be able to just completely accept and release the judgment that might come from friends or family who say, oh, you've already put this much time and this much money. I told you wouldn't be profitable, just like in the 90s, whatever. And, to be able to just totally accept that and then take the next step forward.
Right.
Because so many people, when they try to take that next step, they're still holding on to all this baggage.
Right, that's just the facts part. Even in the situation of being in a trade in one day, and it goes sideways or something, just the facts of what happened. Notice the story that your mind is creating about those facts. Notice the emotional pull, and then come back to, okay, what are just the facts? Maybe even what's the most generous interpretation of this, instead of the cruelest one that my inner critic is throwing out there.
Well, I think actually, go ahead and go to the next slide, because I think it's about, it's not. It's radical acceptance, it's not. So go back one more, sorry. So there are a lot of things that radical acceptance is not. So radical acceptance isn't just blanket positivity. It's not saying everything's great.
And it's the exact opposite of that.
Right. A lot of times being willing and able to accept the things, even if we really don't like it, is just as important than meeting that with the loving kindness and compassion. So it's not just blanket positivity. It's this willingness to see as clearly as possible, or at least to have that intention.
Right. When you think about just the facts part, that if you're trying really hard to make just the facts really pretty, then that's not exactly radical acceptance either.
Right.
That's different than having the most generous interpretation. Do you want to talk about the difference between those two things?
So, blanket positivity, which kind of, everything is great, You know, even sometimes the idea of, you know, everything happens for a reason, which is something many people hold a belief in. But it can blind us to needing to really see critically, you know, what's right here in front of us.
Right.
And it can create that pressure, right,
Right.
that builds.
Yeah, and builds a pressure towards everything has to be great, you know. So.
Right, everything has to be great, everything has to be positive.
Mhm.
There has to have been a reason that this loss happened, there has to have
Right.
been a,
Sure.
so the more that we create that, the more we're driving ourselves into a more narrow focus, pressurizing things, and we're doing it for the best reasons, you know, we're doing it
Mhm.
for positive intention.
Yeah.
But
Generous
Yeah,
interpretation.
the most generous interpretation, you know, even asking that with something that is occurring within us. You know, if we don't ask that question, what is the most generous interpretation? Then we tend to go into that harsh, judgmental quality of things.
Okay.
And even with situations, you know, okay, this is something I can learn from.
Right.
This was really valuable information.
Mhm.
Or even, okay, this was a loss, but I followed my rules, I stuck to my strategy, I, you know, stuck to my max loss parameters. It could have been a much bigger loss. You know, so that's, you know, a thing that we've often experienced in talking with traders, is that's how you go from a red day that feels devastating to a red day that feels, okay, I managed that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
That's that's the survive to thrive type of
Mhm.
thing that,
right.
you know, yes, this is a loss, but
Mhm.
the right thing would not have been to just hold it and hope.
Right.
And at least I cut the loss, and I will bounce back. I will accept that I'm down this amount, and it's going to take some time. Doesn't mean I'm
Right.
happy about it,
Right.
but it's my current reality, and I'm not going to ruminate over all the what ifs and should haves and could haves. I'm just going to accept that
Right.
this has happened.
So should we,
Practicing radical acceptance. So, be your own best friend, accept every part of you. Trade the market you're in, not the one you wish you were in.
Mm-hmm.
Accept the losses that happen. Acknowledge the ground you are standing on in this moment, along with all the feelings and thoughts that arise from being in this place. So if you practice these tools, if you begin to really turn towards yourself with mindfulness, loving attention, embracing and being curious about all these parts that are playing the role in your trading, and meeting all that arises both within and outside of yourself with radical acceptance, you have such a better chance of becoming your best trader.
Yeah, there's no question about it, and it is one of those things that initially is not super easy.
Right.
But if you set that as your intention and you really make an attempt at it, you can do it.
yeah, we tend to do well with the things we put energy behind.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we have one last thing to offer, and this is from Insight Meditation. The work of Jack Kornfield offers the RAIN technique. So when you notice either a strong emotion coming up or a situation that's really hard to deal with, or even a part of you,
Mm-hmm.
you can practice this RAIN meditation that starts one with recognition, then acceptance, investigation, and finally non-identification. So with recognition, really noticing what's showing up.
Mm-hmm.
Notice the thoughts, feelings, sensations that are arising.
Right.
Turning towards it all with acceptance, allowing your experience into your awareness without struggling to change or escape it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is compassionate, radical acceptance. And once you begin to experience a sense of that, you can turn towards investigation. Be curious. What is this? Where is this coming from? And then finally, non-identification. This is the sky and the weather. Realize this is just a passing process that comes and goes, not ultimately who we are.
Right.
Being able to step back, to differentiate ourselves from these parts of us, from the emotional experience,
Yeah.
allows us a greater capacity to turn towards and hold the whole thing.
Right. I think one of the things that I would really encourage for students trading in the simulator is the moment you have a trade that just gets you really fired up and you're really upset, you stop out and then watch it rip back up and you just feel that impulsive urge to, I'm going to get back in. That's the moment to start to train yourself to stop, step back, walk away. You could do this technique if you want, or do one of the other meditation techniques that we do in FOMO Friday, Mindful Monday, and not allow yourself to begin to build a habit or a pattern of giving into that emotion. One of the challenges is the fact that while trading in the simulator, one of the benefits is that you can gain a lot of experience, which is great. And so you could trade for 6-7 hours a day. On the other side, you can also start to form bad habits. And it's a very fine line between trading a lot to gain experience, because watching level 2 is great. You want to make the best use of your time as possible. And getting to the point where you're saying, okay, starting today, the beginning of this week, I'm in training to go live, right? I've gained my experience. I've had a month and a half, 2 months of trading for 4 hours a day.
Right.
Now, starting today, I'm preparing to go live, and I'm going to trade for half an hour a day, 1 hour a day. As soon as I feel that emotion, I'm walking away. Because now it's time to see, can I put together 4 consecutive weeks of being green? Can I have a green month? And that's the point where you sort of flip that switch. So something to be mindful there when trading the simulator, and to really try to prepare yourself for when you do flip the switch to trade with real money. Expect that the emotions you felt in the sim are going to go up here.
Yep.
And of course you mitigate that with smaller share size, but still you need to make sure you've already got in your toolkit some of these tricks. Yeah. All right. So what we'll do next for you guys, we'll do a little bonus, a quick guided meditation. That'll be a bonus part 4, I suppose. And then we'll let you guys continue on with the starter class and hopefully get into the Warrior Pro class. All right. See you guys for the meditation. All right, everyone. So we're going to do a little bonus meditation for those of you guys that are part of the starter class. This is something that we do extensively for Warrior Pro students as part of the Warrior Pro Mentor sessions, Mindful Monday, FOMO Friday, and so Ted is going to lead the way. This is something that I can't tell you. Again, it may for some of you seem I don't need to do this. I've never done this before. I don't need to do it. It has helped me so much in terms of getting centered before I trade. And on some of the best winning streaks I've ever had, I have been in the daily practice of doing a meditation before trading, and sometimes I start to get complacent and I'm like, I don't need to do it every day. Today's a busy day. I start skipping it, and I start finding myself really quickly slipping in terms of how in the moment I am with my trading. And so I really can't underestimate how important this is. So I'll let Ted take it from here.
Sure. All right. So what you can do is just sit back for a moment. And you can either close your eyes or leave your eyes open with what we call just a soft gaze. But just simply let yourself begin to breathe. Allowing everything to start slowing down inside of you. Setting aside for just a little while all the stuff you've been thinking about, processing, taking in, so that you really can begin to allow your attention to turn inward. Just tuning in to the breath itself. Really beginning to notice all the subtle sensations of breathing. A feeling of air moving through you. The expansion and contraction in your chest and belly with each breath you take. Each breath, allowing yourself to become increasingly present here in your body, in this moment. Just breathing. As other thoughts or distractions might come up, you can just gently acknowledge them, and with the exhale of your breath, let them go. Coming back to just this present moment's experience. And as you breathe in this way, you can take a moment to allow your awareness to scan through your body, noticing any places holding a particular amount of stress or tension. On the inhale, breathing into those places. And on the exhale, allowing that stress or tension to flow out of you. Even if it's just a little bit at a time. Each exhale, letting go a little bit more. Letting go of the stress, letting go of the tension, letting go of whatever it is you simply don't need to be holding on to right now. This might begin to bring you into a much easier, open space within you. In that space, you can allow your awareness to move in to the space of your heart, allowing your heart to open, to feel the warmth and loving kindness within that space. Turning towards yourself, just a warm sense of acceptance, compassion. Noticing what it's like to turn towards yourself in this way. Noticing what it's like to be met in this way. As you breathe, you can let this deepening sense of connection with yourself join with the flow of your breath. Allowing loving kindness and compassion to move all through and around you. Each breath allowing yourself to move deeper into this experience. And when you're ready, you can let that sense of connection come back into this space of your heart, allowing it to come to rest in that space, so that it may stay with you the rest of your day. Taking a few more breaths as you allow yourself to start moving back towards surface awareness. Taking 2 or 3 more breaths. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Welcome back.
That meditation was approved by Randy, Rambo, Richard, and Ross. And we will see you guys in the Warrior Pro classes. This is the end of chapter 14. We'll do a quick chapter 15, and then we're going to jump right in to the Warrior Pro classes. All right, see you guys there.